All right. Hello. Hi. All right. We are going to be reflecting on teaching practices and your progress throughout the school year in order to identify your strengths and discuss areas of growth and set up meaningful goals that will help you develop professionally and help out with student outcomes.
Perfect.
So we're going to go through a walkthrough that occurred in your classroom. And we are going to, like I said, just kind of set goals for yourself. I know this is your first year teaching. And so now that you have a year under your belt, think about, okay, what do you want to refine and change for next year? You will still be teaching in a fifth grade math and science class. So
Yeah.
it gives you the opportunity to really refine some of your skills. Okay. All right, so the first thing I want to discuss is classroom management.
Yes.
So, do you want to give me just a little insight on how you feel like your classroom management has been this school year? What are some things that you have in place? What areas do you feel like you need to grow in?
Yes, so I think I've grown a lot with classroom management. Before I started teaching and I knew I was getting this job, I was trying to do all the research on classroom management, and there's a million different things out there, and it never really clarifies what exactly it means. So I kind of just went in hoping someone will help me, which y'all did. It helped me very much. So it was very, very rocky at first, and I still struggle with it now, but it's gotten much better. I have routines with them. They know my expectations. They know, how to do things like how to turn in piece of paper, when to sharpen a pencil, not when I'm talking, and how to speak to each other. That was something we're still working on, but I set the expectation of your tone is important and use your filter. Don't say everything out on your mind. So I think I've done much better than I thought I would have, and I think I have grown a lot in it.
Yeah, great. I know it seems really silly, but thinking about all the procedures that you want to teach, and you think, okay, they're fifth graders, they've been in school, but they've never been inside of your classroom. And
Completely different.
it's completely different. And every teacher has their preferences, like you said, to turning in papers, to when do I sharpen my pencil? How do I ask to sharpen my pencil? Or things like that. So setting those clear expectations from day one and literally going down the list of everything that you want them to know and how to do it. And I saw in your classroom a lot of signs that you made, like anchor charts. It looks like you made it with your students too, so that they are in the loop and they know exactly what your expectation is.
Yeah, those signs are helpful too for if they do it not the correct way. I point to it, hey, read that, try again. And so having them try the action again really helps get them back on track.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so inside your classroom, some trends I saw really were very positive. And in the classroom, with students turning and talking, it felt like they were really supporting each other and supporting their learning. It was helping them see different sides of the answer, which I thought was really positive. Um, during the lesson, seeing, okay, not everybody was 100% engaged. And I know engagement can look different within the classroom, but there were kids working on other papers and homework and things like that. So, be thinking of how can I get all my students engaged while I'm teaching. And if I'm doing a mini lesson, right, I'm giving them the meat of what they're going to need to know. So how do I ensure that they are getting the lesson, they're paying attention, they're working with the materials, so that when they go and have to know the information independently, it's been given to them.
Yep, and I think with the turn and talk, it works well with my group this year because I have such a wide spectrum of very academically low students to very high achieving students, and so just hearing each other's perspectives and talking about it has been very helpful for them.
Good. Okay, so what are some positive reinforcement strategies that you use within your classroom?
So I use a lot of the school-wide reward system of the Bright Bucks. We have that Bright Buck show every Friday. And we also have our grade level Bright Buck cart where they can pick the goodies. They really will do anything for that. And I also like to give them incentives like playing games such as like the Blow It trivia games, or giving them some free time. So just really giving them the incentives of what they like.
Okay.
I think that's been helpful. The Brightbook has been a good incentive, and the trivia gaming, the Blow It, the Kahoots, those have been very, very helpful too.
Okay. Yeah, good. We use PBIS on our campus, and so thinking of how we can, give them those motivators. Not that it always has to be a reward given for those positive interactions, but just something, especially because we're at the end of the school year, thinking of how can we motivate them a little extra, right? How can we get them to live up to our expectations when it's tough, because it's tough at the end of the school year. Definitely. Okay. So what are some areas of challenges that you see with classroom management that you would like to focus on?
It's definitely the engagement. Again, because I have such a wide spectrum of students, sometimes the higher achieving kids get bored, or the kids who don't understand it are like, oh, I'm not going to understand it. I'm just going to get distracted. So keeping them engaged, making sure that they're all working not only with each other, but working for themselves. Like, okay, I need to learn this. I need to get this done. So definitely that engagement, participation, just so that not the same 3 or 4 kids are raising their hands and talking. And also just classroom like culture, community, how they're speaking with one another, what kind of expectations I have for that, and not just, what do you need to do for me, but what do you need to do? What do I expect from each other?
Yeah. All right. I know that we're going to talk about your science lesson that was observed, but have you thought about what maybe teaching in small groups looks like in science? I know in math we talk about it quite a bit, and in ELA it's talked about quite a bit, but have you talked or thought through what that might look like in a science class?
I've done some small groups in science, not a lot, but whenever I have the time, because science is such a quick
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
I will pull my very low kids who I'm like, okay, who can benefit the most from this small group? And it'll be whatever independent work they're working on, or if they're taking notes, we do it when I have done it, we'll do it together. And that has seemed to help. It's just not always time, like possible with time.
Right. I wonder, because you've mentioned what a wide spectrum of learners you have in your classroom, which we know that's going to happen every year. If pulling more small groups for that direct teach might help with some of that student engagement, where you're reaching a certain group of kids for that mini lesson, where you're able to look at them one-on-one and, make sure that they're really paying attention to what's being taught. Because I know with whole group lessons, we can lose a lot of our kids. It's really easy to lose our kids in the engagement piece. So if you are working with them more directly, if that would help. So that's something to think about, especially going into next year. I know we have a brand new science curriculum, and you're being a first year teacher, it was a lot of learning.
Yes.
Learning the curriculum, learning your students and how to interact with classroom management and working with the curriculum. I get that completely. But now looking forward to next year, maybe trying to incorporate that a little bit more, because we know science in 5th grade is a heavy subject. I mean, it's STAR tested, and it's one that we put a lot of stock in. So we want to make sure that we are reaching all of our students all the time with this content.
Yep,
So,
I agree.
Something to think about to help.
Especially since they haven't had a much background knowledge about science until now.
Yes, and so that might help, even just pulling out some of that knowledge that they have, but maybe have pushed so far back that they forget about. But if you're working with them in a smaller group, it might help them kind of reactivate that a little bit more. So, okay, so can you think of any support that you need right now from admin or from your colleagues?
I mean, everyone's been very supportive. Admin's always helpful if I need them. My colleagues are amazing. Most of the things I reach out to them for is how to communicate something to a parent in a proper way, and then behavioral problems. And that is really what I need the most help with, I would say, is the behavioral problem. So outside of like the learning environment and engagement of like, okay, we're paying attention, but actually like, again, how are we treating each other? How are we treating teachers?
Right.
So maybe, I mean, not necessarily more help on behavior, but continued help on behavior management.
Yeah. I think too, when you see the engagement go up, you're going to see the behaviors go down. Because if students are really engaged and active in their learning, they're going to find less time for the behavior.
To cause trouble.
To cause trouble. Yeah. So I think if as your engagement increases, either through just stronger instruction or those smaller group teachings, that the behaviors will hopefully go down and they will decrease. But that's also, I know that we have talked before about morning meetings and just touching base with students at the beginning of your class time and talking through strategies of what does learning look like in our classroom and how can we support one another, and that goes along with how they speak to one another and how they interact with each other. So hopefully too, by incorporating that, like you said that you wanted to next year, that will also kind of help with those behaviors.
Yes.
And even though we feel like it's time consuming, it always does end up benefiting our students more than we realize. Okay, so now moving on, let's go through just this walkthrough and what was observed in your classroom. So you were teaching science and you were teaching the water cycle.
Yes.
All right. So the first part is talking about planning and making sure that everything is aligned with the curriculum standards. All right. And here are some notes from your observation. It says that your lesson on weather conditions and water cycle reflected thoughtful planning and incorporated a variety of instructional strategies. That student engagement techniques and assessment opportunities were also visible. Strategically, you incorporated visual aids, questioning techniques, and real-world connections to help students deepen their understanding of the weather-related concepts. Okay, so you did a really great job of planning for your students and the wide variety that you have in your classroom. Okay, during this lesson, you used technology piece using CurryPod, which allowed students to engage in writing, peer feedback, and conceptual modeling. And you have been using CurryPod quite a bit this school year. That's a fun tech tool. Can you
really like it?
Good. What are some things that you have found the most helpful with it?
I like that it can be aligned with the TEKS directly. And it has a mixture of like informational slides where they can like take notes on, and then like silly slides of like, for the water cycle, it says something like, I can't remember, it said drawing. Oh, it said like draw a rain cloud monster or something like that.
Yeah.
And then another one was like write a story you got caught a time you got caught in the rain. So it's like gives them those brain breaks that are still related with the topic.
Yeah.
But always kind of gets back. It also gives them feedback and allows them to rate themselves.
Okay.
And anonymously.
Yeah.
So that's been very helpful.
Yeah, I like that because I feel like it does touch on our different types of learners, right? You have those who love science but maybe don't like the writing piece. And so it's taking what they love, science topics, but making them write. Or you have those who are not very strong writers, but they can really express themselves through art and drawing. And so it kind of helps touch on all those different areas for our students. All right, great. I love that you use that in the classroom. I do think that's a big help for students in that engagement. Okay, a student asked how hail is measured, and you provided examples and linked the discussion to previously learned content. You also anticipated common misunderstandings about weather and the water cycle, and the lesson design including multiple formative digital response activities through CurryPod. Okay. The formative checks provided insight into student understanding and structured student discourse to encourage explanation, reasoning, and justification of your answers. Very good. Develop more opportunities for real-world data collection, like tracking the weather patterns. You know, we live in Houston where weather changes all the time. So that would be a good connection for them to make. And allow students to apply concepts beyond the classroom and not just what's in here, but beyond. Provide differentiated supports to ensure all students are able to fully engage with the content, especially with very complex scientific discussions. Yeah. Even things like during discussions, maybe incorporating sentence stems or things like that, that would help move the discussion a little bit. I know we've talked about pairing our high thinkers with our students that struggle a little bit more, but we want to make sure that our higher thinkers aren't just running the whole conversation, but that they're giving the opportunity to the other students. Okay. Yeah. But overall, I felt like your planning was really strong and it was aligned with the standards and what we're doing. So great job.
Thank you.
Good job at that. Okay. Do you have any concerns about that?
No, I think what helped them, I remember this lesson specifically. I think what helped them with the Curie Pod was before the Curie Pod, we went over some slides that were in the curriculum that were notes on like vocabulary and like what do you use to measure rain, and that gave them a little bit of background knowledge. So I think that helped with their engagement of, well, now I kind of know what's going on. I can look at my notebook.
Yeah.
I can be part of what everyone else is doing.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so now we're going to move on to domain 2, which is the instruction. Okay, and within instruction, looking at that differentiation piece with your students, with the diverse learners, but also how you monitor and adjust. So being able to collect data, but then being able to analyze and use their progress to make lesson adjustments. Okay. So like you said, you were going through the Curie Pod, but students were also taking notes in their interactive notebooks, which is great, a great tool for them. But a student, like I mentioned before, a student asked you how to measure hail, and you very quickly provided a visual example of sleet and rain gauge and hail size. The student stated that the rain gauge looks like a graduated cylinder, so making a connection to our science tools and math. Great. A student had many questions about weather. You asked the student to write the questions down so that they can get the answers to some of their questions as the unit progresses. So that's good. That's giving them the opportunity to hopefully do a little bit of research on their own, but also kind of looking for those key things that you are going to be talking about. Okay, so let's see here. I lost my place. All right, your class talked about temperature, and you stated specific temperature, how it can range, and told them that which notes to use for that as well. Okay, you also discussed the different types of weather conditions like overcast, cloudy, foggy, clouds forming, sunny, and clear. Okay. So you used a lot of vocabulary words to help them go about. And let's see here, your learning intention was stated. It was that you will describe the weather conditions of the area and describe the weather conditions of the area by making observations of a phenomenon related to the weather conditions. Okay. And so from that, I felt like you did a really good job of communicating what you were learning. Again, that differentiation piece, you're doing a whole group, so it's hard to differentiate in that whole group. And same with the monitor and adjust, just because it was whole group. You pretty much had it set, especially with that Curie Pod where it's set of what you're doing, that it didn't quite adjust to their needs, but using formative assessments later on, you could be monitoring from there, from that lesson. Okay. All right, next we're going to talk about the learning environment, which this goes back to those classroom management strategies that we talked about at the very beginning. So this is just kind of to touch base on what it looked like within this lesson. We're looking at your routines and procedures, but managing student behaviors as well and your classroom culture. And the notes I took said that you provided redirection to students with close proximity. You dismiss the tables one by one, so showing that routine. Students are able to get laptops by themselves. You stated that they named their own tables.
Very interesting names.
Yeah. You turned on a 2-minute timer for them to write the story. Everyone, you were calling everybody back with a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, getting them back to you. Students were getting a brain break by drawing a weather monster, and they were able to transition to plug in their laptops. You used a lot of different strategies like clapping and, like I said, the countdown and all of that. They were able to transition really well. Perfect. That's all. Good job. Overall, the lesson was engaging and it was great for them in learning about the weather cycle. And so hopefully they just continue with that learning and that you can monitor and adjust for them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, a couple of areas I wanted to talk about with reinforcement. These are things that I felt like you did really well in. One of them is communication, and that was communicating your expectations to students and what you wanted them to produce. I feel like you did a really great job of that. They knew when to take notes. They knew when to take their brain break. They knew when to go unplug their laptops. They knew when to plug it in. So your communication to the classroom was great. One thing that I would suggest is your level of questioning. So making sure that when you are asking probing questions like, well, why do you think that? And can you justify this? And what evidence do you have? Explain your reasoning and just making them think a little deeper about the concept that you are teaching. That will help push your students to elaborate just a little bit more on their answers.
Get that higher level thinking.
Yeah. I used to have like a binder ring. If I can find it, I'll show it to you. But I used to have a binder ring of those probing questions.
Okay.
And I just kept it on my desk as kind of a little cheat sheet. So that when a student answered.
Good reminder too.
Yeah. It reminded me to, okay, let me push them a little further. But it also just helped me. I wouldn't get stuck and ask the same question over and over again. Instead, I could, flip it every other day and get a different way to ask a question. So something to consider. If I can find mine, I'll give it to you. It's been a long time. Because after a while, it comes with practice. You'll get it,
Natural.
memorize it, yeah. All right. Also, to go along with that, encourage students to make deeper connections between the weather concepts and real life applications, right? When you're outside at recess, you can have discussions about the weather or dismissal even. And then have students discuss and justify the answers with partners or in small groups before sharing out. That might also help just get more participation across the class instead of just calling on the same 3 kids all the time.
Yeah, I have the same 3 who like to always answer, and then the other 21 like to hide in the corner.
Yeah. And so if you incorporate a little more of like the turn and talk or AB partners or however you want to kind of mash them up, it might help them feel a little more confident in their answers too. Like sometimes they're scared to answer it right off the bat, but if they're partnered with a small group and they answer it and get that positive feedback from their partner, then they might be more likely to answer out loud in the classroom as well. I also like a strategy you could use is using sticky notes to have them answer. Like everybody answer it, and then anonymously they come and put it up on an anchor chart or on a board, and then you just call out answers. And so it kind of gives them, again, a little more empowerment of everybody is answering it, but they don't necessarily know it's me who's answering it, right? But I can listen for my response, and then I can listen for the response of others as well. And so I have had just like a big anchor chart that I just reuse, and people put their sticky notes on there and I just pull and answer them and real quick. And it's a quick way to immediately get feedback of, okay, did they understand what I'm asking? How are they doing with this concept? Kind of like a little exit ticket for them. All right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So Like I said, CurryPod though was great. It was great for that engagement piece. It really let the students work with the digital tools and, like I said, just different modes of discussion and drawing and writing and very student-centered responses. And so that is a great positive there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else about your lesson? Anything else you would like to include?
I do remember, I don't know why I remember this specific lesson so clearly because I can't remember anything else. I very clearly remember this lesson. I think when I do computer activities, I also need to have a backup activity for those who get redirected from doing the wrong thing on the computer, playing games, whatever, and still can't keep track because I did have that happen with a student where he was playing a game. I said, hey, bud, we're, doing this, redirected him, went back to playing his game, and I didn't have a backup activity, so I just told him, okay, put up your laptop, your
Yeah.
But instead of him just sitting there, I could have had a quick, easy, here's a little vocabulary word search, or something like that, just to keep him engaged in his own way, or he or she, and whoever it's going to be.
Right.
So a little backup activity for the duration of that time.
Yeah. I'm not completely familiar with CurryPod, but are you able to print the slides? Like how on PowerPoint, you're
You
able to
can,
print
I
the
think.
slides?
I'm sure there's a way.
Okay, because I wonder if you had one, because you could use it as you're teaching, right? You could have it as notes for you as you're going through it. But if a student is not able to successfully use technology for one reason or another, being able to hand them at least a paper copy where they have the slides, they have the questions, they're able to do the same things, just not on a computer.
Yeah, that could work.
All right.
I'm sure there's a way to print it out.
Yeah, something to think about.
Okay.
I'd be interested to know if you could do that, because I know you can on PowerPoint where you can just print the slides. So I wonder if you can and what it looks like. But that's a suggestion that you could use. Another one, not really always the best, but just having them kind of partner up with somebody where somebody else is holding them accountable, right? Where they might be the one typing it, but they can still kind of look over their shoulder and see. Might not be as engaging though, because they're not going to be the ones physically putting in things, although they could be helping and discussing with the student. Okay. So the next thing I want us to discuss is just overall your progress from beginning of the year until now.
Okay.
I have been able to watch you grow quite a bit this school year. And I think that with your first year coming to an end, it's a great time to reflect before taking a little bit of a break and jumping right back into it for the second year. But some things that I wanted to highlight about you, some of your strengths. One thing is your communication. I know that you communicate well with your students. I've seen it and witnessed how you set those clear expectations with them, but also with your team. I see you constantly in communication of here are what my needs are.
Sometimes over communicating.
Yes, but that's okay, because I promise you the team would rather have an over communicator than not communicating at all. So that communication piece is really important, because teaching is difficult, and it's definitely, I mean, I know at times you might be feeling like you're the only one dealing with a certain situation, but really you're not, and we've all been there. So just communicating what your needs are in the classroom, what is happening, and how we can support you is greatly appreciated. And your communication, it's always very professional too. And if you're going to be late, or if you need to leave a little early for an appointment, whatever it is, just always communicating so we can make sure that you have coverage, and vice versa. Whenever a teammate needs any help, you are very straightforward and communicative about helping out in ways that you can help support them as well. And also the other thing is working on our team. You have been a huge asset to your team, and being such a team player, making copies, again, always just very professional in your interactions, and So big kudos on that because like
I have a good team. A very good team.
but being a first year teacher, it's challenging because you are having to learn how to work with a new group of people and where we do rely a lot on each other, even though you have your own classroom and you have your own expectations, but we still rely so much on each
Can't
other.
do it alone.
Exactly.
No, not possible.
Not possible. So you have been handling yourself with a lot of grace, and it's been great to see you from the beginning of the year and really coming out of your comfort zone, I think, a little bit, and out of your shell, and stepping into your role as
Thank
a
you.
teacher. Also, just using different strategies to meet the needs of your students. I've seen this a lot with ways that you are teaching them. If something is not working, you are not afraid to try something different. Whether that's instructionally, if something is not working with instruction and trying something else out, but also with your behavior management as well. If you realize, okay, we need to reset, stopping what you're doing and resetting. And I feel like those being able to be flexible and using different strategies is going to take you very far as a teacher.
Because nothing is the same from day to day. And you can never plan for everything.
Exactly. So those are some strengths that I have witnessed from you. Now, some areas of growth, like we said, just asking more probing questions with your students on an instructional level. Just trying to get those deeper connections. I think that's going to help a lot with just getting your students to a higher level of thinking and a deeper understanding of the concepts that they are being taught, and making those just more meaningful connections in their learning as well. And then also giving them the chance to really justify what their answers are with their partners, and giving them just more of an opportunity to really discuss the concepts that are happening in class. Yeah. Do you have any notes or any comments about those?
No, I mean, I think that really aligns, especially since I think my biggest struggle is the classroom management and engagement, and that engagement could also be part of me not, like you said, not asking like the proper probing questions. So I think that's something I am excited to work on.
Are there any surprises that you've had through your first year of teaching?
Everything. Everything has been a surprise. I remember when I told my neighbor who's a teacher that I was going to teach 5th grade, she says, "Good luck." And I said, "Oh, they've been in school for a few years. They're 5th grade. They should know how this works. This should be no problem." And she said, "Okay." And a week later, I was like, "You are right."
Yeah.
So that's been a big surprise of like truly having to hold their hands through the process of, like we were talking about earlier, the routines of like how to sharpen a pencil, when to go to the bathroom, things like that. How to put away your notebooks.
Things that you never thought that you would have to explicitly teach.
Yes.
Yeah. Even like how to get hand sanitizer. How many tissues should you
How many tissues?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, yes. So that's been a big surprise of, not that they're not capable, it's just it's like they're resetting. They're like, okay, what are we doing here?
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, let me tell you. So that's been the biggest surprise.
Okay.
Really everything else, it's just like every day is a new surprise. Every day I'm like, well, I never thought.
Yes.
But I've loved it all. Despite the challenges, I've loved it all.
Good. Good. Okay, so 5th grade, I know that your initial reaction was fine. Now being in the trenches of it, how do you feel about 5th grade?
I recognize now, because I think you can't see it from an outsider's perspective, that this is a big transitional time for them. There are a lot of big feelings, a lot of big emotions. Grades are starting to mean something way more important than they used to. Work is way more rigorous. They have to be more organized, time management. So not only is it transition time for that, but also we're about to leave elementary school and
Mm-hmm.
we're going through developmental changes within ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
the social aspect of it. There's so much that changes day to day for them
Mm-hmm.
and so many big things on the horizon that I think that's also some of the behavior
Yeah.
too. That's been the like I would have never thought that either.
Right.
I would, like I said, oh, they know what to do.
Right.
Well, we are guiding
Right.
them.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I mean, I'm sure with any grade level, but fifth grade is such a big transitional year that if you can recognize and reflect what these students go through on a day to day, it helps you understand them a little bit better.
Yes.
Of, okay, we've got a lot happening, developmentally, and a lot happening in our classrooms. And so when you can really gain that perspective, it's going to make you a better teacher because you understand them a little bit better. And so when problems arise, you can kind of rationale like what's happening with them and how you can support them. So I appreciate that reflection about fifth grade.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on is goal setting and professional growth plan. And so we talked a lot about goal setting and how you want to, moving forward, and now that it's the end of the year, a little more reflected than what you want to bring forth starting next year. So one thing that you identified is curriculum correlated assessment data and cumulative student performance classroom data. So using data a little more effectively in the classroom.
I think that also comes with me just being more organized, having time to actually set up a system. I never got time to do that this year.
Yeah. And, this can look like our benchmark exams, and of course using that data really meaningful in a meaningful way, but it can also be just in the classroom, those formative assessments, the summative assessments, and using that to really drive your instruction for math and science. Good. Okay. You also identified through that the data that you want to collect is through supervisor, colleague, and peer feedback, which I feel like your colleagues do a great job of, and you do, of communicating what data you have and what that means for our students and making good informed decisions, but maybe next year just kind of pushing it to that next level. Good. And then being able to analyze your instructional planning and delivering practices with that. Okay. Good. Okay, so you wrote that your goal is to increase the ability to differentiate instruction by designing and implementing math stations where at least 2 groups are pulled daily for focused instruction based on individual student data, aiming to close learning gaps and support diverse learning styles.
I said that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fancy.
But that's a big goal, but I think it is important in your classroom, just that differentiation piece, and making sure that your students of all levels are getting what they need.
And that's something I'm way more comfortable with now, especially with small group and having that enrichment time of working with the kids who really need the help. Of, okay, how do I break this down in the simplest way? Let's start with the basic level. Okay, do I need to even go further back? Do I need to go further back? So seeing where they are and making those changes, I think during small group is very helpful.
Yes. I would agree with that, especially, we can say this in science too. We don't have to just say math, because science is also one where if they're falling behind in science, then the new concepts that we're piling
Are
on
not going to connect.
They are not going to connect. And they're just going to get lost in it.
Well, yeah, but like with the water cycle, they're like, oh yeah, we've done the water cycle before, but then we went into detail and how it correlates with the sun and the ocean and, back to matter, it never goes away. And so then they were like, wait, what? Yeah. And I even had a student ask me today, wait, what's condensation? So, yeah, so that it's just taking that somewhat simple concept and turning it into something way more complicated.
Yeah.
So if they don't even understand the simple,
Right.
they can't get the
Then they can't.
deeper.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is a great goal for you going into next year. And even this summer, when you go to those professional development classes, you know, now that you have a good grasp of what the content is that we teach in 5th grade, now let me dig a little deeper. And
So that's something I'm excited for because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, now I know what I'm teaching. I'm not learning it alongside with them, which I'm sure I'm still going to learn stuff alongside,
Yes.
but it's not brand new to me
Right.
anymore.
Right.
If I have to look up, wait, how do I multiply? How do I round decimals and multiply? And,
Right.
things like that.
Yes. So I think that would be a great goal for you over the summer during your professional development is just thinking, okay, here's the foundation of what they need. If they don't have this, what am I going to do? And how can I help support them and bring them up? And then, yes, of course, throughout the year, using those assessments to help guide your instruction. But you're going to have kids who get it
Right away.
right away.
Who even know it before I tell them about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's what are we going to do to close those gaps for those kids? Good. All right. Right. I think that is just about going to wrap us up. I just want to thank you again so much for meeting with me and allowing me to discuss with you all the wonderful things that are happening in your classroom.
Thank you for your insight.
Yes, and excited to see how you progress moving forward and how we can help support you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.